Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Victoria Planning Commission meeting for April the 18th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Tyler, could you please call roll for us?
David Brown,
Present.
Dr. Derek Hunt,
Present.
Victor Mendoza,
Present.
Dan Mikalinka,
Present.
Pardis Mohibitosh, Brian Olging, Monica Rodriguez,
Present.
Rebecca Spears, Cynthia Staley.
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you very much. Just want to remind everybody, tonight's meeting is being simulcast via TV 15, so just want to let everybody know. And we'll go with citizens' communications. If we have any citizen wishing to address the Victoria Planning Commission tonight, please do so at this time. If you wish to speak on an item not listed on the public hearing, please come forward. All right, looks like we don't have anybody. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Our first item on the agenda is amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance. Julie, could you please give us your report?
Good evening. So it has been a really good couple of months. We've been administering the ordinance since it was adopted and effective February 16th. As you know, council chose to create an opt-out clause for folks that weren't quite ready to follow the new ordinance, where they could opt out and follow the old ordinance. And the opt-out clauses were exactly what we thought they would be. People are choosing to opt out on the dumpster enclosure requirements, the general contracting license, insurance requirements, and the plat exemption requirements for difference between 5 and 10 acres. So we knew that those new regulations were going to cost folks money, and that's pretty much the only thing that's being opted out of. Everyone is utilizing the new ordinance. But as we've been administering it, we've found some errors and typos and things, or unintended consequences, things that I promise you, I told you that this ordinance would not be perfect, and we would be coming back with some things that need to be changed. And so we want to get those changed before the June 1st opt-out deadline expires, and everyone has to follow the new code. So I have a quick presentation to go over what those proposed changes are. I attached to the packet the entire UDO, and there was some grammatical changes, like in the word cardboard was missing the D, or extra periods. I did not include those in the presentation, just assuming we're all good with those types of changes. So these are the ones that are actually a little bit more substantive. So in the manufactured home park, we had completely left out parking requirements, which was not intended. Earlier drafts had the 2 parking spaces required, and I think, you know how Word document gets of that size with all the track changes. I think it just inadvertently got deleted, and we did not mean to delete parking requirements for manufactured home parks. So we added that back in as what was previously required, and that's 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. We also added a reference to the bar section, and that makes more sense on the next slide. For nightclub lounges, we had added a reference to our TABC regulations that are in Chapter 14, and so we added that Chapter 14 reference on the actual table. So as you can see in the supplemental standards, we added that bar to, it doesn't change the regulation really, it's just a reference point, because we do have the TABC regulations in Chapter 14. So when people are looking up nightclub and lounges, or what about bars, obviously they also have to follow TABC rules, so we added that. That first section, A, is a new to the UDO, but not to our old ordinance. Our old ordinance had a planned shopping center caveat, and this is for shopping centers like the Kohl's Shopping Center or Aldi, where they really function as one lot, but if you look at the ownership, it's actually multiple owners, but the parking lot functions as one large parking lot, and so the public doesn't really realize that there's multiple lots. And so in those cases, when it's all master planned and we need a deviation of an individual lot with size, depth, setback, or any of those kind of dimensional requirements, it's not a variance when it's a planned shopping center. We make the recommendation to Planning Commission on the plat. Planning Commission can approve it, and then it doesn't have to go on to City Council as a variance. So we realized that flexibility was left off because everything had moved to the actual land use chart, and so it was hard. It didn't get put into the supplemental standards to have that flexibility. So we added that back in. So that's a copy and paste from our old ordinance to the UDO. Then the names of the historic districts. I think that we got so hung up on the discussion with council about, do we want historic districts to regulate, what you can or cannot do with your historic property, that the basics just got left out. So we talk a lot, we call just in the office, the downtown historic district, but there's actually two kind of downtown historic districts. The purple is the original town site historic district, but of course that's an area that we all call as downtown. It's West Street, North Street, East Street, and then Water, actually instead of South. But so that's not the downtown historic district. It's actually the original town site historic district. And then the yellow is the kind of more the central business district, and that's the downtown business historic district. And there's some more flexibility, and that's where the buildings are all zero lot line built up together. And we also meant to not have a height limit, and they put a minimum height limit, which there is a minimum height limit with building code. You have to have a minimum ceiling height and clearance. That was supposed to be maximum height limit, not minimum. And then I thought, why confuse it? Just say there's no height limit. So you'll see that change on E. And this is also just kind of a confusing, it was so simple that I think my staff and folks got confused in reading it. But in the accessory dwelling units, an accessory dwelling shall have one unit, and that's basically saying it's an accessory dwelling unit, you get one unit. We don't want duplexes or triplexes or quadruplexes being accessory dwelling units. We just want one. So we just clarified it to say it's a maximum of one dwelling unit, because they're like, what is that saying? Shall have just one dwelling unit? It's kind of was so self-explanatory, it led to confusion. So this is, again, I'm not sure how they got deleted, but we managed to delete 3 of our historic districts, and that was not the intent. Again, I think so much discussion about historic standards and should we do certificate of appropriateness and how much should be regulated or not, just led us to overlook the basics. So this section just recreates exactly what we have.
Julie, may I ask a question at this point? On the College Park Historic District, you've got the northern boundary as airline. Do you mean that to be Hiller?
No, I went back and looked at our old ordinance and it's airline.
So we have put a 95-unit apartment in a historic district?
Again, historic districts only have the regulation of no manufactured homes and no billboards. So that was a big discussion with council. Do we want it to be more? And the answer ended up being no. We want to leave it to no manufactured homes and no billboards.
Thank you for that clarification.
And then this is another copy and paste from our old ordinance to our new ordinance that allows us, we wanted to keep this flexibility. It didn't really fit in the table. And so we put it in the supplemental standards on setbacks, and that's for existing structures. And it's when an existing parcel that's been developed out needs to be replatted for some reason, or has never been platted, needs to be platted or replatted, but that existing development provides some constraints on meeting the dimensional requirements. This allows, again, same flexibility. That's not a variance. It's a recommendation by staff to the Planning Commission, so it still requires Planning Commission approval. It wouldn't be it would kick it out from being a minor plat or anything, but it does streamline that process so they don't also have to go to council. The next is in parking. So of course we eliminated parking requirements for commercial in the downtown and original town site districts, so the downtown area. But we've come up across some folks wanting to provide the parking. And if you read the other parking sections, it's very clear, I think, that if you're providing parking, you have to meet those dimensional requirements, but you have to continue to look on. And when you read this section under the applicability, which is the first section, and you read it and you're like, oh, I don't have to provide parking, there's no reason to keep moving on and realize that if you do provide parking, it still has to meet the specifications in design and construction. So we added this sentence so people will keep reading on once they hit that. So really a lot of these things are just clarification. It's in there, it's what we mean, but we want to be very clear. same situation here. So now, of course, you have to put a dumpster in a refuse or dumpster enclosure. If you read the dumpster enclosure section, it requires that those dumpster enclosures be paved. But again, we had someone question, and so we made it real clear, and in no circumstances shall containers be placed on unpaved surfaces. And that's also in our current ordinance. So we're just really trying to make it very clear for everybody. I mean, I think there's a lot of questions too, because it's new. And so they're reading it like, what did you mean? And, whereas after it gets administered for many times, there maybe won't be so much second guessing.
Julie, could I ask another question, please?
Yes.
You say it has to be a paved surface. So asphalt is acceptable in this case?
Yes. Although,
Would it be more clarifying if you made it all concrete?
well, not all asphalt parking lots are made the same. There are some that have, strong bases. And so when you read the rest of the section, it does say that the approaches shall be able to withstand the dumpster enclosures
yes.
should be able to withstand the weight of the truck and all of that. But at the same time, it's sort of a maintenance issue if an applicant chooses to not completely, if it's existing and they're redeveloping and they just add the dumpster enclosure and, they don't build it to as highest specifications as they need, then they're choosing to take on that maintenance too. But it is in there, it's just not in the applicability. This is one of those items that Rick had on his wish list, and we just it didn't make it in. And this is actually something that, again, has kind of been buried in building codes because we're in a wind zone, with hurricanes. And so signs over 25 feet for the last decade or more, we have been requiring them to submit sealed drawings to make sure that they don't, they can withstand wind loads. But it was a little bit hard if you ever got questioned because he was digging out the wind zone tables from the building code and saying, okay, this is a structure, a sign is considered a structure. And it just really makes it clear. Signs over 25 feet need to be engineered. The improvements required section, so this is the to and through. And again, our old ordinance had a to or through provision that wasn't really followed very well, so we kind of reset and said, yes, we want to and through. But then we ran into an issue with a corner lot. And not only was it a corner lot, the sewer line to extend, it wasn't feasible to extend it because of the depth of the sewer line. There's engineering components in extending utilities. And the city engineer was very much like, this doesn't make sense, but, is it a variance? And so we added flexibility to where the city engineer can make the call and say, no, we're not going to extend that through because it literally wouldn't serve anybody because of the depth of the sewer line. And so for situations like that, we added this sentence to basically allow the city engineer to determine the to and through, how far, so it could be less, essentially. This is the section, the floodplain ordinance that we knew we were going to be updating. This is kind of what prompted us to be able to be so diligent about making all of these notes and changes as we were going through, because we knew that we were going to have to do this, because we got notice from FEMA that they were changing the maps, but we didn't necessarily have all the details. And so, of course, they have since given us, delivered the most recent flood insurance study and the new maps, and they have a July 17th date, July 17th, 2024. And then we also are amending the permit procedures. So this is only for the floodplain. But a form board survey for elevations is required. So currently now, when you get a floodplain permit, you have to provide a survey of the improvements that show those improvements are above the base flood elevation. So we've only had this happen once, and it was the GLO home, and of course the state has deep pockets to remedy issues, and not everybody else does. And so we want to catch it and make sure that that never happens again. By a form board survey is basically they form up the foundation and then they go do a survey and make sure that that foundation is going to be poured at the level or the appropriate BFE level. And it's basically that survey is required at the end by the surveyor going and doing the form board survey. It just gives them a jump start. So it's a little at a cost, but it would then prevent someone from building an entire house the BFE not being at the appropriate level, and then they have to raise the house, which of course is much costlier than if they just realized that they formed up the foundation incorrectly. And so this is very, very small amount of permits are affected by this because it's only in the floodplain. Some cities actually require those form bore surveys for setbacks, and that's kind of standard practice for all construction, but we don't really have those issues with setbacks. It's usually in very fast-growing communities where you have one house after another being put up and as quickly as possible. And so there's not as much things for, I guess, the surveyors, or not surveyors, the builders to go off of, so they have to get surveys before they start framing. But we're just limiting it to, like I said, the floodplain for that BFE establishment. The next is floodways. So it's not just the floodplain. There's the FEMA regulates the floodplain, and then they also have another layer on the map that's the floodway. And the regulations in the floodway are very strict. And so this is just an explanation of what that regulation is. So if you read, encroachments are prohibited, including what those are. Within the adopted regulatory floodway, unless it has been demonstrated through a hydrologic or hydraulic analysis performed in accordance with engineering practices. And we have a lot of engineers that ask, what is that? And so we added this second part to be very clear what that is. And so that's an engineering no rise or no impact certification, and the supporting technical data that must stipulate no impact or no changes to the 25 and 100-year base flood elevations, floodway width, the new cross sections, and allow existing cross section anywhere on the model. And so therefore the model should be run for a sufficient distance both upstream and downstream of the development site, and so that the no rise, no impact certification is backed up with that data, and we want to see it. So it just really explains what the rule that we already had in place was. The next is really simple changes in our procedures. So we just actually are flipping item 3 and 4. So how our site plan review is that folks submit 2 sets of site plan, we redline them, and then return them, and they fix those red lines and return back to us. But because these were flipped, on that first set of red lines, they would submit 6 copies sometimes back to us, but they had those, they maybe didn't address all the red lines, so they were submitting 6 copies of something that wasn't approved. And we only want 6 copies of the final approved site plan, otherwise that's just a lot of extra copies. And so, but they use this section kind of as a checklist, and so by flipping them and changing, and once all corrections have been made, then they submit the 6 sets. Hopefully we won't get extra unnecessary sets. So some of these are really simple, but they do make an impact in our office and operations. The next is on the sign permits. I'm not really sure the site plan requirements for signs. It talked about the stormwater drainage master plan. I think there was too much cutting and pasting in it, just completely threw everything. We never intended, and we never have, and we don't want to implement in the future signs to have site plan approval requirements. We want, on the sign permit, we want plans of the sign, and then we want some kind of survey or plot plan that shows, all the improvements on the property and where that sign is going, but it doesn't have to be to the scale of a full site plan. And so this language just basically says, give us this information, and that we need 2 copies of that sign permit application package. So that's deleting all of that 6 sets of a site plan, and it just was not what we intended. And so that is all of the amendments that we are asking you to make a recommendation to council on. And this is proposed to go to the May 7th council meeting, be adopted at the final adoption at the 2nd council meeting for an effective date of June 1st.
Julie, is this the effort of the staff here,
Yes.
or is this Freeze Nichols? It's a huge effort. It's hard to imagine what it all entails.
The original UDO was probably 60-40. Staff was very heavily involved. I mean, Freeze and Nichols did the bulk of it, but we were very involved because we know our community in a way that they don't know. But this effort has all been staff's effort, and it seems like it's a lot, but it really wasn't, because as we were really good, as an issue came up, as we were, reviewing, because I kept telling everyone now that, eventually we're going to all memorize this. But in order to not get the codes all both floating around in our heads, I said, every application, go reference the ordinance. So every time we referenced it, and we were actually, looking at it against a plan, and we're like, what are they trying to say? What's the question? And we would mark those and highlight them. And so it was actually pretty easy to compile all this because we had been
Don't believe it.
documenting it.
I don't believe it.
I have a great staff.
You do.
It really resulted, and ultimately they all come to me because there would be a question, and they'd be like, what are we trying to say here? And I'm like, that's something to fix, and I would write it on my list. And so Celeste and I sat in my office, and it only took us maybe 2 hours to actually go through the red lines based off of all of our
Congratulations to the
notes.
staff,
So,
yourself included, of course.
yeah, no, the entire UDO, I think, is working really well, especially the site modification permit. As you remember, our old site plan, any new development requires an all or nothing. So whole site plan had to bring that site into complete conformance, 100%. And now that we have, the 30% kind of threshold in the site modification permit, people are really happy when we're negotiating and saying, okay, you can build this, small accessory structure, but we need you to fix this sidewalk or, add a tree, and instead of the whole site plan, the whole site having to be updated. And so it's working really, really well.
I'm curious about a remnant from a previous meeting, but probably 4 meetings ago, we had somebody here appealing for a mural to advertise his business.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any language about a mural in these documents.
So there's a public art provision, and the Main Street Department is working on a public art policy.
Good.
And so if the public, once they establish that policy, and, if it doesn't meet the definition of public art, then it's a sign that we regulate. But that definition of what is public art and how it's going to be administered and that's still a separate policy that's being developed by the Main Street, or Economic Development Department.
So if it's not, they don't decide if it's not decided to be public art, it has to abide by the, okay,
ordinance.
the wall sign ordinance.
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we go ahead and accept.
Well, we
these.
gotta do a public hearing
Oh, okay,
once Julie's through.
all right.
So you're through. Do we have any more questions for Julie, team? If not, we'll go ahead and I'll now open up for a public hearing. If you wish to speak on this item, please do so at this time. All right, we don't have anybody, so we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And now, any further discussion? If not, I ask for motions or actions.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we go ahead and accept the amendments for the UDO.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion on the table by Dr. Hunt and a second by Ms. Saley. All those in favor of approving the UDO amendments, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Passes, okay. All righty. All right, that's done. So we'll go with the consent agenda. There are 2 items on the consent agenda tonight, which are the minutes to January 18th meeting and a preliminary plat for industrial reserve at US 59. I'll go ahead and ask for any motions or any discussions.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion on the table to approve by Mr. Mendoza,
Second.
second by Mr. Brown. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Consent agenda passes. Okay, we'll go ahead and go into other business. Mr. Tyler Ward, you've got the podium.
Good evening, Commissioners. So within the month of March 2024, the City of Victoria processed a total of 131 permits, as well as a total of 142 overall combined MEP permits. The City of Victoria collected approximately $106,400 within the month of March 2024. Whereas last year in March 2023, the City of Victoria processed 155 permits, as well as a total of 189 overall combined MEP permits. And the city of Victoria collected approximately $54,000 last year, March 2023. So we did have an increase in permit fees collected from last year. Also, within the month of March 2024, the Development Services Department processed one minor plat, one major plat, 2 site plans, and then we did add this section to the monthly development report. It's the site modification section that Julie was just talking about. We had 5 of those within the month of March 2024. Thank you.
All righty. Next thing on the agenda is items from the planning commissioners. Any,
Just to follow up a question before the meeting about the De Leon statues, I wanted to clarify, because I got more clarification from Joel at the CVB. So the statues are 68 inches tall for Patricia, and Martin Teen De Leon's is 80 inches tall, but nobody knows their exact height. So it was a guesstimation, but he was reported to be over 6 feet, although there's no evidence of that.
okay.
80 inches tall. That must include the 18 inches, the granite pedestal
Yes.
they're sitting on. It has to.
Well, Google says that Mr. De Leon stood a full 6 feet in height.
He got cheated on the statue.
Yeah.
All right.
But
Yeah, really.
who knows, right?
Who cares? Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for that update. Anybody, if we don't have any more business, I'll go ahead and close this meeting at 20 to 6. Everybody have a good weekend.